Welcome to another episode of the Your Longevity Blueprint podcast. Today, my guest is Dr. Tabatha Barber, who is a highly sought after physician, speaker, and two-time best-selling author who has dedicated her life to empowering women in their health journeys. Overcoming early life challenges, including being a teenage mother and a high school dropout, she rose to success through faith and perseverance. Dr. Tabatha holds triple board certifications in obstetrics and gynecology, menopause, and functional medicine. Her virtual medical practice offers compassionate care to women across the nation. She's the creator of the Fast to Faith Coaching Certification Academy, where faith, health, and business intersect, helping women achieve spiritual and physical transformation. Through her international best-selling book, Fast to Faith, podcast program, and supplement line, Dr. Tabatha inspires thousands to heal from within by focusing on gut health, hormone balance, and soul nourishment. She's a beacon of light in a sea of medical darkness. Welcome to the show, Dr. Tabatha.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Again, I first had you on the show in 2021. Seems like forever ago. A lot has happened. That was episode 51, where we talked about functional gynecology, which we'll touch on a little bit today. And of course, I encourage listeners to go back and listen to that episode to really get to know you. But I know since that time, a lot has changed. So you've shifted your focus a little bit. You've obviously written another book. And I believe this is really on your true passion, faith, and you're blending that with fasting. And so we really want to dive into that today. But before we get to that, please remind our story or our listeners of your story. We mentioned a little bit in your bio, but tell us about you and where you started and where you're at now.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, life has been quite the journey. And honestly, I was a wild child. I didn't really have plans for my life or my future other than being a rock star, which wasn't very realistic since I didn't even play an instrument. But I became pregnant in 11th grade and I had a traumatic labor and delivery. And I had a come to Jesus moment where he essentially told me I had to get my life together for myself and my daughter. And somehow I figured that out. I had dropped out of high school. I went back, got my GED, got into college, med school, did the whole thing. I became a physician like I felt I was supposed to do. I felt like God was guiding me. But fast forward 20 years, I was broken in a broken system. I was, so sleep deprived, I couldn't remember the names of the patients I delivered the night before. I couldn't walk away from the OR table because my back was in so much excruciating pain. I was having such heavy periods that I was having accidents myself during deliveries, like soaking through,
Wow. Yeah.
just being so thankful that I was gowned up and nobody could see my scrubs. And so people were looking to me, women were looking to me to heal them and have all the answers for why they felt bad. And here I was worse off than they were. I was in survival mode. And I got to the point where I took time off for back surgery because I couldn't function any longer. Took 6 weeks to heal. And on my third night back on call, I re-injured and couldn't move. And God laid me in a bed for 7 days, looking straight up at him with nothing else to do. Husband carrying me to the toilet. That's about it. And during that time, I realized I hadn't eaten. It was 3 or 4 days and I just hadn't eaten. I was crying out to God, why didn't you fix me? Why am I not healing? What is wrong? And I really just started looking to scripture and studying the Bible and being reminded that fasting is part of healing. As a first year resident, I had to write NPO orders in the hospital after surgery. I would tell the nurse, do not feed my patient. They're healing from surgery. Those resources need to be diverted to go heal, not to
Yeah.
feed
Yeah.
my patient. And so, this just created this download in me that I didn't really understand, but it shifted me. And so I just started looking outside of this only world I knew. I only knew conventional medicine, and it was such a broken system, and it wasn't fixing me. There was no answers. And all of a sudden I found Mark Hyman and Amy Myers and all these people talking about gut health and stress and sleep and food as medicine. And I was like, what are they talking about? This is insane. And Fast forward, I left that conventional world. It was very scary, but I had healed myself and I figured out why I was the way I was, and it was almost all my doing. And so once I took back control of my life and my health, everything shifted and I could no longer practice the same. I had to leave that cushy job with the nice salary and the 401(k) and the chief of staff status. Like I couldn't do it anymore. I could not practice that Band-Aid medicine. And so here we are, I don't know, what is it, 6 years later, and life looks nothing like it did. And the coolest thing is, I had no idea that any of this was going to happen, but I trusted God. I believed in
Mm.
Him that He had another plan for me, just like I trusted Him, you know, 30 years ago when He said, "You can be a doctor," and everybody just kind of laughed at me. I trusted Him. And so I want to help women like lean into that and help them find their strength in their creator because you can shift, you can get your health back, you can reverse chronic disease, you can love your life, but it takes some hard choices and some really brave decisions on your part, honestly.
Beautiful. Yeah, that was beautiful. When you say you healed yourself, I know a little bit more of your story than we've shared, obviously, because I've interviewed you before and I know you. But so heavy bleeding, you were able to reverse. What about the back pain? What, like, I want to know, what
Yeah,
about that?
so I know, right? Like I went back to the surgeon finally, and he was like, "Oh, back surgery's like Lay's potato chips. You can't have just one." He's like, "We'll just put some rods and screws in there. You might herniate above or below that area and need further surgery." And I was like,
No,
"Time
thank you. Yeah.
out. I am 40 years old. I am not having more back surgery. This is insane." And I left that office determined to find another solution. And that's what led me down that path. So you just have to make a decision like, I'm not doing crazy anymore. Like I'm done with this. We're going to find another way.
Hmm.
And the truth of it was that I just started listening to my body and it started to tell me why it was in pain, why it was like having heavy bleeding. And it was because I wasn't respecting it. I was treating it like a garbage can. I was living on donuts and Mountain Dew and coffee. I wasn't exercising or moving my body. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't handling any of the stress of like all the life and death situations I was handling. I would just shove it down and go to the next delivery or the next, issue. I had a marriage that was a hot mess that I wasn't handling. Like all of that stuff, my body was keeping score. My body was manifesting physically what I was not dealing with emotionally. And
Sure.
so I needed to address all of these areas. And when I cleaned up my diet, I couldn't believe that my brain started to work again. I could remember things. I could have so much more clarity. And it was just by like adding MCT oil and olive oil and not eating donuts and giving up gluten and all of these basic things. They were like life changing to me. And I just felt the need to share that with everybody. Like, oh my gosh, I stopped eating gluten. And all of a sudden, my thyroid is no longer being attacked. My Hashimoto's numbers are coming down. My back pain is just gone. So, like, how can I not go on and share that with the world? It's so impactful.
So empowering. Yeah. To echo what you just said, you share in your book that God gives us one house, aka our body, right, for our earthly endeavor, and that it's time for us to honor our bodies that he's gifted us with. So let's talk about how we can do that. So you just mentioned, I've never heard this word, but in your book you say don't eat frankenfoods. Did you make that up, that frankenfood? Okay.
Did. I think I
Okay.
did. I just envision these foods in the labs like being taken apart and then they just make all this crazy, it's not even real food. It's just
Okay.
made up pieces of food and they inject it with all kinds of toxic stuff. And we literally just need to get back to faith foods, the foods that God has given us since the beginning of time. That is what we should be eating. We should be
Hmm.
eating animals. We should be eating plants. Like
Hmm.
that's the truth of it.
Yeah.
And we think we know better than God, and we're just mucking it all up, honestly.
Hmm. So Frankenfoods are the things like the donuts you mentioned, Little Debbie's, Pop-Tarts, Starbucks, like all the processed foods. At least I tell my patients, I've never used the word Frankenfood, although I may have to use that now. But I say if it was a food like for your great grandma, like that's a real food. Like she didn't have Go-Gurt, she didn't have any of these crazy Little Debbie snacks, right? They had real food. So that's the kind of food that we should be eating. So I
Well, and
agree.
even like people think it's healthy food, like the granola bars or the chicken nuggets. Like, eat the real chicken, eat the real grains if you're going to eat grains, just like get back to that whole food piece of it.
Totally agree. So, do you believe fasting is also part of us kind of honoring our bodies?
Absolutely. Our bodies were created to go through times of fasting and times of feasting. We did not have grocery stores on every corner even 100 years ago, let alone thousands of years ago. So we have existed as a species in this feast famine cycling state. And the only reason we got away from that is because the snacking industry and the breakfast industry have really just made us believe that we should be eating every couple hours. And then the ADA got on board and was like, yes, you need to maintain your blood sugar. You need to eat every couple hours to top your blood sugar off. And what that does is creates a chronic production of insulin, and it drives this insulin resistance pathway, this prediabetes and diabetes. I mean, the numbers are staggering at this point. The amount of fatty liver, for example. So fatty liver used to be from alcohol. People would
Hmm.
need liver transplants because they had cirrhosis from alcohol abuse. Now fatty liver from your diet is becoming the number one reason for liver transplants. Like, that is
That's
mind
insane.
blowing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's heartbreaking. And we're seeing it in children. There's 24% of adults who have fatty liver and 5 to 10% of children. And it's from all of the simple carbohydrates and the processed foods that we are eating. It's changing our microbiome, it's changing the bacteria that's living in our gut, and it's affecting our bile ducts. Like, I was a surgeon, okay? I loved doing surgery. Don't get me wrong, but we are removing organs unnecessarily. So many women have their gallbladders out, and then their appendix, and then their ovaries, and then their uterus. Like, it's this slippery slope, and women do not realize like this is all very unnecessary. And it's like you can prevent so much of this by just making different choices every day. And I just want to pause to like take the shame and blame off of us because we don't know. I started researching like sugar in food for the book. And what I found was in the 1800s, one person would eat 2 pounds of sugar in a year. So, okay, think about those little 5 pound bags. You'd eat 2 pounds in one year. Currently, the average person in America eats 60 pounds per year. 60. Like, that's insane. But we don't know we're doing it because they're
Yeah.
putting it in our ketchup, they're putting it in our salad dressing, they're putting it in our tuna packets. Like, even if you're trying to be healthy, you are still getting way more sugar than you ever should be getting. We're supposed to have 25 grams a day. One soda or one pop is like 32 grams plus. So you're done with one drink. It's like we have no idea what we're doing to our body, honestly.
I agree. I want to go back to something you said too, because I do tell my patients this, like having a hysterectomy, so having your uterus removed or having your gallbladder removed, never gets to the root cause of the problem as far as why it needed to be removed in the first place. Like we still have to get to the root cause of the problem, which it sounds like you're saying is at least in part due to diet, like what we're putting in our body. Because if we don't change that, well, then we're going to have another organ removed, right? Like the vicious cycle continues. But it sounds like changing our diet and incorporating some fasting is a strategy to stop that cycle. So let's go back to fasting here. Um, how do you feel? You talk about this a lot in your book. I mean, we've talked about kind of a little bit medically how important fasting can be, that we're meant to be in different cycles of feast and then fast. Like our bodies were created to do that. But back to faith, how does intermittent fasting empower you and strengthen your faith?
Mm.
In your opinion? Yeah.
Yeah, so I love this because I ran a fasting program for a few years, and women would come in, they would do the 8 week program, they would lose, 10, 15 pounds, they'd feel amazing. And then they would call me a year later and they had gained it all back and they felt terrible. And I just got so frustrated. I'm like, why won't these women change? What is going on? And God said to me, you're not helping them nourish their soul. So they're still having this hole in themselves that they're trying to fill with food. And especially women, we eat our feelings a lot of the time. We eat when we're stressed, or we drink cocktails or wine. We eat when we're sad and when we're lonely. We eat when we're happy because we're getting together with people and we're having like parties and, dinners and all of these things. And a lot of us just aren't realizing how much our emotions are driving our food. And so once you really start to see that for what it is and deny your flesh a little bit, you start to feel how powerful that really can be. Oh, I actually have some control over the choices I'm making. I don't have to reach for that ice cream and that glass of wine every night as soon as I walk in the door because I can just talk to God and read scripture and find my strength through Him. I can find my calmness and my peace to get over my stressful day. But it requires a shift physically and
Sure.
mentally. And so I always tell women, like, you have to, in order to change your body, you must first change your mind. You have to renew your mind and just set it on a different outcome. And then you can start to shift your body. You really can. And fasting has so many amazing physical benefits. Like it helps us heal, it helps us regulate our blood sugar. It clean house. It gets rid of all the bad cells and broken DNA in our body, all that good stuff. But when you fast, you open the channels to hear from your creator. Like you get rid of all of these fleshly desires and cravings. They go to the side and all of a sudden you just open that gateway and you can hear what God is trying to tell you for your life. He will tell you why you're struggling in your relationship or why your business is stuck or why you hate your job and what to do about it. But if you're not in that conversation, or you're not even paying attention, you're not going to hear it. So food is a noise, it's a distraction. It prevents us from connecting with God. If you look in the Bible, anytime somebody wanted to be closer and hear from God, they would fast. They would
Mhm.
go off on their own and they would fast. Jesus was the
Including Jesus.
best
Yeah, exactly.
example
Yeah.
of
Yeah. Yep.
that. Like, I know that my father has a plan for me. I'll be back tomorrow. I need to, go over there and do this for a
Yeah.
little while. And we don't do that. Busyness is a distraction from the enemy. Like busyness is not going to get you anywhere except keep you stuck and unhealthy.
Oh, guilty. Guilty as charged there. Okay, so it sounds like you're saying rather than come home from work and opt for the snack, the pop, the whatever it is, essentially you're saying use that time instead to pray, to sit, to connect, to listen, right? So that's how you can use it as a tool rather than do that, do this. So feed your soul in this way. Kind of
Hmm.
what you're saying.
Yeah.
And listeners can read your book, they should read your book, but could you briefly just walk us through your faith it approach? That's something that you kind of go with. And I have the little acronym written down here too. I'm putting you on the spot here, so
No, that's okay.
to pull it
So
up or whatnot. Yeah.
I love the faith it method because if you can just keep this acronym in your head, you're gonna start doing it. But essentially, it's fast for focus, ink it for clarity. So here's the thing: when you have thoughts going, feelings going on, if you start writing them down, you're gonna get so much more clarity because ideas and thoughts just swirl in your head and you stew over them over and over. Like you're never going to fix a problem by just continuing to think about the problem. You need to ask to see the solution. And so
Mm,
I teach women in the Fast to Faith program how to meditate on a scripture and then write down what God is saying to them. Write down the solution. So journaling is super, super powerful. And then the key is you have to thank God in advance. You have to have an attitude of gratitude and believe it before you receive it. That's like the opposite of this world. We always want to see before we believe, but God has called us to believe before we receive. So if you just act like it's done and believe that He's doing it and get into that position, things will shift. And then you have to hear from Him and initiate action because action creates more clarity as well. God's not a genie in a bottle. You can't just like sit around and make your wishes and then poof, things change. Like He wants you to be a part of the situation, of the journey, and get into action and try things. And He's going to show you what's the right next step and what's not. He's going to close doors and open doors. And the more that you can really invite Him in and understand that, like your whole life will literally shift. And then the last piece, which has been my hardest lesson this year, is to trust His timing because I want everything today. I want everything on my time, right? I think I know best for me and
Mhm.
that I want this huge, massive, elaborate thing to happen next week. And He's like, you're not ready. You still need to handle this. I'm still working on this over here that you don't even know about that I'm trying to prevent for you because it would be a disaster, or you need more people in place for you to handle this. Like He sees the bigger picture you don't see. So you
Mhm.
have got to trust His timing. So if something takes twice as long, if you continue to believe that it's for your good and He's making a way for your victory, like it's just so much better. And then you don't have to live in worry and in stress and all of that. So faithing it is just, it's been the game changer. Adding that piece into the fasting program has literally kept women in their transformation and paying it forward. So now we're doing this coaching certification where women are learning how to be fast to faith coaches and they're teaching other women the faith it method. And it's
Yeah,
just
so
like
cool. Yeah, spreading.
beautiful
Butterfly
ripple
effect.
effect.
Yes, yes.
It's like absolutely incredible. And I can't take any credit for it. Like God gets all the glory for that. Like all of these downloads He's given me, I am just doing what He's telling me to do. So it's really amazing when you just open up and allow Him to work through you, how much better life can be than you trying to do it yourself. Like I'm done carrying the 80-pound backpacks up the hill pushing a boulder. Like I'm not just not doing it anymore, you know? Like let me do His plan for me. It's so much better.
Ah, you're just leaning in. Beautiful. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to that faith it just for the listeners. So fast for focus, ask for guidance, ink it for clarity, thank Him for His unconditional love, hear His plan and desire for you, initiate action, and then most importantly, as you concluded, trust that He's making a way for your victory. I love that. That's just so beautiful. So I love that that's in your book. And it sounds like it was a game changer for your clients with long-term success.
Yeah.
So love that. Okay. So let's talk about fasting just in general. So what are you recommending for your patients, like especially if someone's really nervous to get started with fasting? I know you say this is a way to trust your body, trust what God has, entrusted you with, right? I've been in, well, you know this, but for the past, I don't know, 5, 7 years, 7+ years, either been trying to get pregnant or nursing. So I haven't done a lot of fasting myself just because I'm biologically not in the, I guess that season of my life. In the near future, I probably will be. But for patients who maybe are nervous about fasting, how do you recommend they get started? And then I want to talk about how fasting for women is different than men. But how should someone get started with fasting? And maybe this is part of your program too that we need to
Yeah.
get to. Yeah.
Yeah. So for you, you are fasting a little bit. When you're
Yeah.
sleeping, you're
Yep.
kind of getting into that fasted state, and we call that a time restricted eating window. So everybody's doing a little bit of it.
Sure.
When you start adding in a longer time period, then you start to increase the benefits of it. And the key for women is that you can't do the same thing all of the time, especially if you are still in reproductive age, because your hormones are cycling and they're changing and your needs are changing every day of the month. So I love teaching women to just get in tune with their body because we're all unique. Like in general, we all kind of have this 28-day cycle if we're healthy, and we have the follicular phase and the luteal phase, and we feel different. But if you can figure out when you have energy, when you need to rest, when you are a little bit short and snappy, like that is how you can learn to eat with your cycle, and that can be really powerful. But a lot of women you're dealing with the pregnancies, the breastfeeding, the postpartum, all the things. So you're like feeding another human. So we
Right,
don't
right.
want to deprive you. That is where you should just be focused on lots of good faith foods, lots of healthy fats, lots of protein, keeping the carbs, very healthy and complex, not going for those simple carbs unless you absolutely need it. But the problem is that as a society, we have disordered our eating so much that a lot of us have lost our metabolic flexibility. We're all stuck in sugar burning mode.
Right.
So we reach for carbohydrates because carbohydrates are a bunch of sugars connected together. And as soon as we put them in our mouth, the enzymes start breaking them down into sugars, and we get immediate energy and we get immediate blood sugar rise and we feel better. And so a lot of us are stuck in this sugar burning mode, and we're looking for carbs every couple hours. But the problem is most adults aren't that physically active. And so we don't actually use all of that stuff we're putting in our mouth. And our body says, well, now we got to store it as fat somewhere. And so the first place we store it is our liver, hoping that you're going to go run that 5K, but you never do. And so we just keep storing more and more and more until you develop fatty liver, until you start putting weight around your organs, that visceral fat that can increase your risk of heart disease and diabetes. And then it's on the hips and the arms and the thighs and the places we don't like it. So we have to remind our body how to get into fat burning mode. And so unfortunately, we've been sold a bill of goods. We've been lied to. We've been told that fat makes us fat and fat is bad for us and fat elevates our cholesterol. And none of those things are true. Fat is essential, especially for women. Fat is the backbone of all the trillions of our cell membranes. All the cells that make up our body are made of a phospholipid bilayer of cholesterol. So our everything that transports in and out of our cells cannot happen unless we have quality fats in our diet. Cholesterol is the backbone ingredient for all of our steroid hormone production, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, DHEA, cortisol, aldosterone. Like we need fats in our diet. And so if you want to get out of this sugar burning mode, you actually have to eat more fat. So I teach women how to get into a more ketogenic diet to begin with, to remind their body how to burn fat for fuel. And then you can start shrinking your eating window. You can drop off breakfast, just eat dinner and lunch. You could do a dinner to dinner fast. You can progress to a 3-day water fast if you're looking for deeper healing, deeper clarity.
Have you
And
done a bunch of those? So I'm just personally asking.
yes,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's so powerful. And watching the women in my 40-day program, in the coaching certification program, do their 3-day water. I just had one woman the other day. She went 5 days. She's like, I feel amazing on day 3. Can I keep going? I was like, absolutely. And then she messaged me. She's like, that was an incredible 5 days. And I used to do 5 days back in the day. I shortened it because 5 days is a little extreme, but it's so powerful. So, depending on the depth of healing that you want to do or spiritual clarity that you want, like you just have to give your body what it needs. It just needs salt, it needs rest, it needs detoxification, because when your body starts like clearing out all these broken cells, toxins are going to get released. And so I usually have women take binders during this longer fasting time. And it's so empowering. And then you got to get into this feast famine cycling, this carb cycling. That is where I see women really shine. And that's why they fail a lot of times with a lot of the fasting programs out there, because men don't need to carb cycle the way women do. Men can do the same thing and have like twice as many results. I see this all the time. Women will fast. they'll do a 16-8, so they'll drop 40 pounds and then they'll plateau. And then they'll be stuck there for like 6 or 12 months and they'll finally find me. And I'm like, you're not eating enough. You're not getting enough fats. We have to shift your diet. We have to add in a higher carb day once a week and remind your thyroid that you're not starving to death because your thyroid's taking in all of this information
Sure.
and going, is she going to eat again? Like, we really haven't seen any fat or protein for a while. And so it will downregulate your metabolism and it will like run on survival mode. It will make too much reverse T3. So that is why I think that the 40-day program I've created is so powerful because it accounts for that and it supports your thyroid to be optimized and to function properly. And that's been the game changer for women, honestly.
I want to go back to that water fast. So do you in your program coach women if they want to do the 3 or 4 or 5 day water fast? Like obviously how to reintroduce food then? Like do you walk them through all that?
Yes,
Okay,
so
yeah,
we have
because
two
I don't
soft and slow days of
yes.
reintroduction because your digestive system
Yes.
has been on the down low. You haven't been making stomach acid or
Right.
enzymes in the same amount. And so you really want to make sure that you're eating easy to digest foods when you reintroduce them. You don't want to eat like a huge salad with a bunch of raw broccoli and cauliflower and a big steak without any support. So that is a big piece of it that we talk about. And so it's just about doing things in a way that honors your body and its physiology and understanding when your body's trying to tell you something. You know, if you're feeling a headache, if you're feeling tired, if you're feeling irritable or jittery, you probably need more salts. You probably need potassium and sodium and magnesium. We burn through so much magnesium, especially trying to detoxify. And we don't replace it. We don't get enough of that as women. Like magnesium can be a game changer, honestly.
So back to you already kind of mentioned how fasting is different for women and men because men's hormones aren't cycling. They're just the same every day, right? So from a female standpoint who is cycling, are you recommending during the days of bleeding that they not fast as aggressively because they're losing nutrients?
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
cycle day one, the first day of
Yeah.
your period, you're bleeding. It's usually a pretty low energy day,
Yeah,
especially if you
yeah.
have heavier periods, you're losing a lot of iron and blood. So take it easy, like give your body a break. I even recommend that for working out. Like just go for some more gentle walks or yoga or something more low key where you're tapping into the parasympathetic nervous system, rest and digest. And probably about day 7 to 10, you're going to have that uprise of estrogen and you're going to feel amazing. And you're like, I'm going to go run a marathon. Let me lift all these weights at the gym and capitalize on that. Do that, and you can probably handle a longer fast and get through there. And then you're going to go into your ovulation section where you're going to have the drop of that, you're going to ovulate, but your testosterone is high. So some women feel really good during that time as well, where they're like, "Hey, I'm feeling good." You know, our our physiology wants to get pregnant. Even though you might not want to get pregnant as a woman, like that's what your body wants to do. And so it's looking to mate, it's looking to love on people. And I find that that can be a good time to fast if you're not trying to get pregnant. If you are, take a break. Let your body ovulate. Let your body do those things that it's supposed to do. Then you're going to have a second wave again when your progesterone rises and your estrogen rises. And that's another good time that you might feel like doing a dinner to dinner fast. And then your hormones are going to drop for that period. And that's when you need to give yourself a break. If you want to take a nap, if you want to go to bed at 8 p.m., if you want to eat the ice cream for that day or two and the extra chocolate, like just give your body what it is asking for and respect it as opposed to fighting against it. Because that's what I did for decades. I just fought against it. I thought it hated me. I hated my body. I treated it like crap. And all it did was destroy me, honestly.
Well, let's talk hormones here. So I'm glad that we focused a lot on fasting and just eating clean. and maybe even advice for patients like myself, not that I'm, like that much younger, just a little bit younger, like cycling women, right? So let's transition then into like menopause. So what would your best overall advice be to reclaim health after menopause? And this can incorporate fasting too, but what's your advice for those women a little later in life?
Oh my gosh, fasting is your superpower in menopause.
Okay.
Like it's so good. You don't have to worry about your cycling hormones. And so you can just feel amazing. And here's the trap that I see is that menopausal women feel so good in a fasted state that they chronically undereat and they really get into this space of like, I only ate dinner 5 nights this week. Like they're just always in a fasted state. Their brain works better burning those ketones for fuel. Their body feels better because it's not as inflamed, giving their gut a rest. A lot of times we're eating foods that are super inflammatory. And as you've probably talked about a million times on the show, like when your estrogen levels are menopausal state, low, 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 your joints hurt, your muscles don't work as well, like everything hurts. And so when you eat inflammatory foods, you add on to that pain and that inflammation, and your joints feel worse and you're stiffer and you don't want to move your body. So I see menopausal women like loving fasting to the point where they
They
don't
overdo it.
get enough nutrients. So we really
Sure.
do have to focus more on like what you are eating when you're eating and get that nutrition in.
Perfect. Okay, let's talk about. I know we talked about this years ago on the first podcast I brought you on, but it's been a while. So let me go back to kind of what we talked about at that point, which you've briefly mentioned on the show, like the difference between conventional gynecology, which you were once practicing, and then the functional gynecology, which you've more transitioned to. So what's the difference there?
Yeah. So a conventional gynecologist, many people would be surprised to know that we're not hormone experts. We're surgeons. I did 4 years of a surgical residency, learning how to do a hysterectomy 4 different ways and colposcopies in the office and that C-sections and deliveries. I was not studying the intricacies of hormone balance and how the gut and the adrenals and the thyroid all work together. I had to go on to study functional medicine to understand any of that stuff. And so we're looking to the wrong people to help us with our hormones. That's just the truth of it. Gynecologists do not understand hormones by and large unless they have went on to get certified in menopause or anti-aging medicine or
Sure.
functional medicine. It's just
Right.
they don't know. The only tools I had in my toolbox as a conventional OBGYN were birth controls, pills, or other hormone suppressing medications. Like I would put 25-year-olds in a menopausal state for a decade to manage their endometriosis. Like to me, that feels like malpractice now, but that is the standard of care and it breaks my heart. So we're driving these women into menopause who should have hormones.
Mhm.
They're they're having bone loss and osteoporosis and memory loss and
And
heart
depression, and you're
disease and
exactly
diabetes
right.
and depression
Yep.
and getting their antidepressants and they're not sleeping, so then they're on Ambien. And it's just this terrible slippery slope. And it breaks my heart because they're not treating the problem. They're doing all this band-aid medicine and they're not looking for the root cause of why is endometriosis actually happening. It's happening because of a hormone balance, inflammation coming from your gut, causing this chronic inflammatory state in your gut and pelvis. That is what the problem is.
Mhm.
But we don't address that. And so I think that don't even get mad at your OBGYN. They just don't know. So you have to find somebody else like Dr. Gray or myself who understands this. And there are reasons for all the struggles you're having: fibroids, endometrial polyps, terrible PMS, PMDD, cystic breasts. All this stuff are There is a root cause for that. It could be that you have liver congestion from your fatty liver, from your high carbohydrate diet. It could be you're drinking too much alcohol and you're not metabolizing your estrogen properly. It could be that you have a high toxic burden because you have so much toxin intake every day. You're heating your food in plastic and
Mm,
drinking out of plastic water bottles and doing all the things. There are reasons you could have mold. I've been seeing a ton of mold, a
me
ton of
too. Yeah.
tick-borne illness. I won't
Mhm.
even go into the theories about that, but there it has seemed to ramp up in the last couple of years. And that will keep you in a state of estrogen dominance, a state of hormone imbalance, and it kind of prevents us from being able to heal your gut when you don't tackle these mold issues or
Mhm.
these tick-borne bacterial issues, things like that. So just keep asking why, keep looking deeper. That's the whole point of my book is for you to understand from a functional medicine perspective, what is going on in your body in every aspect? Why are your adrenals acting the way they are? Your thyroid, your gut, your immune system, your sex hormones, all the things, because if you can get educated and understand what's happening in your body, you can advocate for yourself and actually choose like, no, I don't think that Mirena IUD is the best decision for me. I think I need to figure out why I'm having these, issues of depression and weight gain and heavy periods. They're all related, I promise you.
Yes, I totally agree. I was next going to ask, because you do talk a lot about gut health, and I know that's a focus of your practice. And I was going to ask the relationship between gut health and hormone health, but you kind of already mentioned that. So I'll just kind of echo what you said and kind of throw in my case. So I had stage 4 endometriosis, and little did I know I had, and I was struggling with infertility, right, years ago, and my listeners know a lot of my story. But I tested myself for celiac, and sure enough, my blood testing was positive. So the gluten that I had been eating, right, which no GI was going to even ask if I had endometriosis, and no gynecologist was going to ask what I was eating either. So, like, just a good example of how conventional medicine is so fragmented. But little did I know the gluten I had been eating, I had loved bread. Even as a child, bread was my go-to, right? The
Me
gluten I had been
too.
eating wasn't just causing inflammation in my gut, that was showing up in my uterus, right, as endometriosis, which was impacting my ability to get pregnant. And so I had a biopsy. I didn't have celiac yet, but I was on the way to having celiac because of I had antibodies already. And I
Mm.
did take gluten out of my diet. Eventually I took dairy out as well. And eventually I got pregnant, right? Story for another day. That's just a brief example of how gut health can impact hormone health, right? AKA uterine health. And inflammation can manifest in any organ system, but obviously also the endocrine system. And I love how you were mentioning, because I have a lot of patients who have fibroids and cysts and polyps and these things, and they're asking, what can I do? Sometimes they do need to be surgically removed, but what can I do to prevent future recurrence? And so I think the three things you were just mentioning were improving gut health, liver health, and then, of course, getting your hormones tested. Because if you do have poor estrogen, we'll say congestion or poor estrogen metabolism, low progesterone, that's going to contribute to the problem. I don't know if you have anything else to add for those, for specifically for polyps, fibroids, cysts. You kind of mentioned that, but I wanted to go back there because I know a lot of our listeners have had those issues.
Yeah, I just want to explain to women. So, as a surgeon, I would go in to remove your endometriosis or your fibroids or whatever. I'd go through the abdomen, through the belly button, put a camera in, a couple different instruments, do a diagnostic laparoscopy or robotic surgery. When I go in, your bowels are literally laying on and around and underneath your ovaries, your fallopian tubes, and your uterus. They are touching 24/7 all the time. They are physically together. There is no compartments, they're not separated.
Mhm.
All of the inflammatory processes that are happening in your gut, all the little cytokines and all the
Mhm.
little bad cells that are happening, they're seeping through that that muscle, the serosa, they're going out into the pelvis and they are going to your ovaries. They're going to your fallopian tubes and your uterus. And so as a surgeon, I would go in to the abdomen and I would see bowels glued to the pelvic organs. Like
Mhm.
we call it scarring,
Right,
adhesion.
right.
That's stage 4 endometriosis when your bowels are scarred to your uterus, ovaries, or tubes. And I was trained that it's always the uterus's fault. It's the endometriosis's fault that the bowels got stuck there.
But what's causing
When
the
in
endometriosis? Yeah.
reality, it's
Yeah.
the gut. The gut caused that adhesion. The gut drove that inflammatory
Inflammation.
process and attacked it and stuck it to the uterus or the tubes or the
Mm.
ovaries. And that was mind blowing when I learned that because I thought back to all the cases I had. I even had a case I went in and it looked like raging infection covering all of the bowels. And I was like, this must be PID. This must be untreated chlamydia that has just went awry and like attacked these bowels. I always came from the mindset of the reproductive organs are the problem and the bowels are just the innocent bystanders, but it's the reverse. She had a raging celiac infection. It was
Yeah.
uncontrolled, and I could physically see it outside of her bowels going into her pelvis, affecting her pelvic organs. Like that to me needs to be talked about. That needs to be
Yes. Yes.
studied. That needs to be addressed, but we're not. It kills me. So I'm so glad to hear that you figured that out. Like you would not have your beautiful children had you
Right.
not
Right.
figured that out. So thank you for sharing that with people because people need to hear this.
Well, that was such a good analogy. I mean, as a surgeon, you're in there, you're physically seeing it. And even back then, you didn't really put the dots together until you had the veil was lifted. And once it's lifted, it's like you could never go back because once you can't unknow what you know. And now that's why you're so passionate to share this with the world, right?
Right. I don't need to do the surgery. I need to heal the gut.
Yes, yes. So listeners, share this with friends because everybody needs to heal your gut. Yeah. Okay, so let me go back to I want to go back to menopause again just for those listeners because that's a big chunk of my audience. So what are the implications post hysterectomy? So when the female does have the hysterectomy, what happens to her hormones?
They're gone. So the ovaries have a lifespan, typically 50, 55, somewhere around there. Your ovaries are like a factory. They have been pumping out eggs every month through ovulation. That ovulation caused progesterone production, and you're also having estrogen and testosterone production. When ovulation stops and you are no longer running that factory, the hormone production stops as well, and you can't get it back. There's nothing you can do naturally after menopause to get your hormones back. Like that is a common misbelief out there, especially in the functional space. What can I take naturally to bring my hormone levels back up? There's nothing. You cannot. I will put this caveat in there. Your adrenals are
Mhm.
your backup ovaries.
I
So
say they're your B team. I say that all the time. Yeah. Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
once your ovaries are no longer producing, your body says, okay, adrenals, it's time for you to step up and make more
Mhm.
DHEA, estrogen, and testosterone from that scenario. But so many women are going into menopause with burnt out adrenals that they don't have the backup hormone plan. They don't have the B plan. And so they are struggling way worse than any, generations past because our great grandmas, their adrenals were fine. Their adrenals got them through just fine. And so you really want to be paying attention to your adrenals in your 40s. And if they're tanked and like you're already struggling, you want to consider bioidentical hormone replacement. And I believe that every single woman should have that discussion and decide for themselves. It's an individual decision, but you have the right to hear the risks and the benefits of being on them and not being
Mhm.
on them. And unfortunately, conventional OBGYNs are still focused on symptom relief. They are still trying to only push BHRT for hot flashes, night sweats, and mood swings. That is the least of our worries. We need to worry about how our body is changing from a physiologic standpoint for the rest of our lives. Once you no longer have that protection of estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, your entire body changes. Your risk of diabetes increases, your risk of heart disease, your bone loss increases, your brain health diminishes, your skin changes. We see that. We lose
Mhm.
I remember looking at my face one day, I was like, where did all my fullness go? It just went whoop. because I was in that transition. Our vaginal health, which nobody
Hmm.
talks about, our bladder health. So
Hmm.
now we gave up exercising because we're peeing our pants. We gave up sex with our husband because it's painful. We, no longer are interested in our job because we have no drive and our brain doesn't work the same. We can't complete projects and do all the things we used to do. Like, you are going to change as a person. You're going to feel differently. Women tell me they feel apathetic. They don't feel love the way they used to. Like, they're just kind of a shell of
Hmm.
themselves. And some women, they do amazing in the menopausal state and they don't need hormone replacement therapy. But by and large, that's not what I see. I see
Yeah.
women are really struggling and they want to feel like themselves again. And they want to know that they're not broken because we're living just as long in the menopausal state. So you
Hmm.
better make it a good quality of life. And so you deserve a conversation about hormone replacement therapy. And I'll just say, like, the last thing people are always like, well, how long do I have to be on it? As long as you want to feel good and
Right,
function.
right,
Like,
right.
it only
Yeah.
works when you
Yep.
take it.
Yep.
That's
Yep. Yeah.
like, if anyone ever tries to take my hormones, I will hurt them because it is how I feel amazing and function and do all the things I do. I couldn't have written another book and started a coaching academy and run a virtual medical practice that sees women all over the country and coach my kids lacrosse and, help my other two children. Like, I couldn't have done all that stuff if I didn't have my estrogen patch on. Let's just be real.
Again, you have so many good nuggets there. I want to go back to a lot of patients ask me, well, why suddenly do we need hormone replacement therapy when my grandma didn't need it 20 years ago, but I think 20, not 20, longer than that years ago. But you hit it on the head, I think, with the adrenals. My response to that is usually, well, we now live in a toxic world, A, but B, our stress is very different. So yeah, our B team isn't ready to take over, right? When the ovaries either shrivel up and throw in the towel, they're done, or if they're removed from, surgical state. If our B team is just not, like you're saying, like ready to roll, then unfortunately we just don't have that backup. So I think that is a difference between why maybe our grandparents didn't take hormone replacement therapy, although maybe they did need it, and why we have greater needs now. And then also, when you were saying patients ask how long do they need to take hormones, I mean, I've been doing this for, I don't know, almost probably 15 years now, and I have patients who I put on hormones back then when I started, and they're still on hormone replacement therapy, and they're in their 90s, and they're not giving up the hormones because they feel like that's preserved their faculties, their brain function, right? Reduce cardiovascular risk, like you're saying, protect their bones, whatnot, and their joints, and they're not planning to stop. So you can take hormones as long as you would like. However, I also tell patients that's why we check levels, and I do recommend some sort of breast screening, right? I let patients choose what that is. But as long as we're monitoring the patient, then I totally believe, yes, to age well, you can stay on hormones forever, right? Indefinitely. I think
Yeah,
that's what,
I
yeah,
used to
yeah,
have women in their 70s and 80s.
yeah,
They
yeah.
were on, and this was back in the days of Prempro and Premarin. So even those synthetic hormones were better than no hormones. I
Hormones.
mean, that's a whole nother discussion, but I inherited a very um, mature practice, and they were already all on their synthetic hormones when I got these patients, and they were loving life. They were playing pickleball, and they had a great relationship with their husband, at 75 or 80 years old, and they were not going to give that up for anything. And I just thought, yeah, I'm definitely going to be on hormones when I'm that age. Like, look at the difference. The difference was astonishing. The women not on the
Yep.
hormones, they would come in with their walkers or, with their wheelchairs, or they would be like
On
telling me
10
how,
medications. Yeah.
yeah, they have like 10, 15 medications, or they just had bypass surgery, or they, like, no, thank you. No.
Yeah. Not going to be you. Yeah. So why do you think so many doctors are still afraid of giving hormone replacement therapy?
They just don't know. Like I said, they're not trained in it. They don't understand hormones. We get, one course in endocrinology in medical school. And that's really the gist of it. I mean, honestly, OBGYNs hardly know more than a primary care doctor about hormones. That's just the truth of it. We pretend that birth control pills regulate periods. They don't regulate periods. They shut down your
Down.
hormone production. They override your system. They They are not a solution, but that is our go-to as a conventional OB for everything. Like whatever your complaint, it's a birth control pill or it's a surgery, and that is actually not an answer. It's just a band-aid, and it's giving you new problems and new
Mhm.
issues. So we're we're just expecting too much. The training is lacking. We need to completely revamp the entire medical school system. And for now, like it's not going to happen probably in our lifetime, but for now, you just need to find people who
Mhm.
are educated in hormones.
Yep. And I think for the listeners, they like to your point, they may just assume that the gynecologist should know how to
Yeah,
manage
because we
hormones, but
call them
like,
women's health experts,
right.
right? We do, but they're not.
But you're a great example of how, yeah, they don't know. So if you're going to have brain surgery, you're going to go to a brain surgeon, right? And if you do need, we'll just say an endocrine, well, gynecologic surgery, yes, you go to a gynecologist. But if you want your hormones optimized, then please go to someone who's specialized in hormone replacement therapy. So,
I
yes.
think that's a great analogy. A brain surgeon, they don't know anything about psychology or how your thoughts work or how your brain actually thinks through things or functions. It understands like the anatomy and can remove a
Hmm.
hematoma or
Hmm.
like fix a skull fracture, those types of things. But it's not, it doesn't understand how it functions. It's the
Right.
same.
Same. Hmm.
Gynecologist is the surgeon. They'll remove the problem from your uterus or your ovaries, but they're not going to help you understand how to get that to function better.
Right.
That's a
Yep. Yep.
great
You said it
analogy.
better than I did. Yes. Great. So just a few questions here as we wrap up the show. You've mentioned a few of these, but do you have any other transformations you've seen in your practice, maybe where you've blended all of what you've shared today? Bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, improving gut health, your fasting program, like share some of the transformations you've experienced.
Oh my gosh, every single day. I actually had an amazing day last week where it was Friday. All four of my patients, they were just like singing my praises and telling me about their transformation. I just like was on cloud nine all day.
Yeah, yeah,
But honestly, the most common scenario I see is a woman struggling with the perimenopausal transition. Her periods are wonky. She's either given a birth control pill or she tried it, it doesn't work, and they're threatening surgery, or they won't give her birth control because, she's over 50 and that's high risk all of a sudden. And so they don't have any other options for her. And by and large, when women clean up their diet and heal their gut and really get control of their stress in their lives, like everything shifts. So I just saw last week somebody who had all these erratic bleeding episodes, and she was just like an angry person. Like she just was like on edge all the time. She wasn't sleeping. She wasn't getting along with people. And lo and behold, her estrogen was like 500 and some, and she had no progesterone. She's not ovulating or making any progesterone. And so she's just like this raging estrogen mess. And it's manifesting as heavy periods, excessive weight gain, irritability. And so we started to help her liver metabolize her estrogen, bring those levels down. We started giving her some progesterone replacement, and lo and behold, like things started to shift. And then she felt like she could actually tackle dealing with her diet and her moving her body and doing those things. But it wasn't until we got her feeling halfway normal again that we
sure.
were able to even tackle that stuff. And that's what I see a lot is women are like, I can't even meal prep or think about going to the gym. Like I'm over here hemorrhaging for 2 months out of the, 2 weeks out of the month. And I'm like, I don't want to talk to people. I don't feel good. I'm angry. I'm bloated. I don't feel good in my clothes. So you tackle that first piece, then we can really start to make some headway. It's so powerful.
Love that. Thank you for sharing. Well, for listeners, I absolutely encourage they read both your books, but the most recent book, of course, and I just want to share with you, we both have similar faith. And so I love that you share Bible verses through each chapter. I think just reading your book almost just felt like I was having a conversation with you. It's just a very easy read for the listeners. It's not over everybody's head. I think that all the listeners would really enjoy that. You also quoted ML King, Martin Luther King Jr. in your book saying, we don't have to see the whole staircase, just the first step. And I think that's just so true. And that for patients, who are listening, You just have to get started with something, right? So for some patients, that's maybe exercise, or another, it's getting gluten out of their diet, or another, maybe it's doing something like trying your, faith to fasting program. So I certainly encourage listeners connect with you so they can just get started with one thing, right? We have to start somewhere. So, Dr. Tabitha, tell us where listeners can find you and your new book and get started.
Oh, yay. I love it. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
I did the Audible version of my book because I know people like to just listen. So the way they listen to podcasts, they can listen to my book on Audible. And that was a painstaking effort. So I would love it if you would listen because it was really hard for me to record that entire book in my crazy loud home with all my children and dogs. But such an easy read, like you said. I've been known to just simplify complex medical things so that any layperson can completely understand what's going on and not feel intimidated by all the big words and all the craziness. So it is an easy read. So you can go to fasttofaith.com. You can get it on Amazon. And I would love for women to download the free intermittent fasting guide, The Feminine Way, because if you can see how you should be incorporating this lifestyle as a woman, bringing that faith piece into it, it could be the absolute game changer. I would love to just pour into whoever's listening. Like that's my goal for New Year's is I'm just pouring into women and giving them what they're needing because that is just the spirit God's given me right now is just give and serve. So I hope women will reach out and connect and find some value in this and then share it with their other girlfriends because literally every woman needs to know what's in this book. It's just like it's a guide for understanding your body, just like your energy, your blueprint, like we need to understand what's happening in our bodies.
Mhm. So do you have an app? Do you have an app?
I
Or
do.
okay.
So there's a free portion in the app, resources, recipes, and there's an amazing sisterhood of women who are all just like cheering each other on, lifting each other up, giving each other advice. And then there's the 40-day program is in there. My medical practice is in there. Like it's a really cool app. It's called Fast to Faith, just
Faith.
like
Okay.
everything else.
So if they
But
go to fasttofaith.com, they're going to find you and all your
yeah,
goodies.
I
Okay.
mean, there's literally no excuse. Like we're giving you all the resources. Like you said, you just have to take that one next step.
So tell us about your upcoming 5-day challenge.
It's going to be so good. It is 5 days to a lighter you. So it has a meal plan to really help you get into fat burning mode. Most women lose 1 to 3 pounds that week. It's pretty impressive. And I'm just teaching women the foundations of what's happening in their body and why it's happening. And it's been really exciting to do this challenge in the past. And we do, on the back of it, we do the 40-day program together where we're doing Lectio Divina every day. You mentioned this. It's scripture that we're meditating on 5 or 10 minutes. We're journaling, but it's teaching you this progressive fasting program, looking to scripture and to God for your strength. And it's just a game changer to see women's minds shift. When you start to renew your mind, like your body can change any which way you want. So you can have a completely renewed body for 2025, but you have to start with your mind.
Love it. Okay. What's your top longevity tip? I don't remember what you said last time.
Oh, I don't remember either. It's probably changed over the past couple of years, right? My top longevity fasting.
Yeah.
Fasting and moving your body. Like you have to do both. You have to move your body to release the toxins, for your body to function, to maintain that muscle mass, to regulate your blood sugar, all the things, and to feel good emotionally. Like when I stop moving my body, I'm not making my serotonin and my GABA and all my feel good neurotransmitters, my adrenaline. And I just feel depressed. I don't feel as engaged in life. I don't feel comfortable in my clothes. So, like, they're both so important. I can't say one without the other.
No, yeah, well said. Well, thank you again for coming on the show again and reminding us the importance of connecting with our creator through fasting and encouraging us to just get started. Thanks for being a vessel and really encouraging women to lean in, find strength in Him, and for trusting in God with your life and encouraging others to do the same. So you're just such a gem. Thanks for coming on the show.
Love you, girl.